Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your East Oakland advocate. In my previous episode, we're talking about Bruce Lee and his influence on the Bay Area. And uh, Bruce Lee was born right here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Uh, and so that's his close ties to the Bay Area itself. But also, one of the things, a little tidbit that many of you may not know, but there was actually a television series, a show that was written originally to include Bruce Lee as a lead character. But the politics of Hollywood back then uh, kept a lot of Asians out. And one of the things that uh, prevented him from getting that part, or the producers and the television executives said that Bruce Lee was not a good fit because they said that his English was not very good, and a lot of people could have trouble understanding and following the storylines of those show Kung Fu. Those of you that were around in 1972 may remember that show. And that show actually ended up starring David Carradine, a white person playing the part of a Chinese person. In fact, throughout the show, he was uh, portrayed as part Chinese, part white. And in reality, um, back at the time, a mixed race person would not, and I repeat, would not be accepted into learning martial arts of the time, of the period, because that was one of the things that I spoke about in my last vlog. And um, but that was the politics of the time, of the 60s and 70s, not to employ uh, um, Chinese or Asian actors with an accent. And so, and then on the flip side of those same white executives from the bigger powers that be, um, they said that the Asian, the Chinese accent was so strong on Bruce Lee that they could not move forward with the TV show. And so that was the cause for characterizing the show and the person. And then they put in David Carradine. So, uh, and much like that happens, even I say that the Chinese community, the martial arts community, was very different back then, and in fact, would not teach uh, white, black, or Hispanic people if you were not 100% Chinese, and they could document that you could not learn um, kung fu, the real kung fu, not this Americanized version of uh, our martial arts. And the reason why I say that is because American martial arts does not take into account for real battle, for real world fighting. And that's how I grew up. And that's one of the things that made me stand out in in fights, because fights wouldn't last long. By the time I got into high school, I already had, let's see, it's from 1968 to 1975. So 68, 69, 70, say 1, 2, say 30, 74, 75. So I had 7 years under my belt, uh, so to speak, and of training. And the kind of training that I got was full contact, where you get kicked in the head, you get kicked in the ribs, you get kicked in the legs, and you get punched and hit. And people say, well, that's really cruel. That, well, actually, it's not cruel. in my last vlog, I also said there is another sport that trains full contact, and that's boxing. And other than that, there's no other sport in America that trains full contact. The Muay Thai and uh, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that um, Mark Zuckerberg uh, has learned, and then he supposedly got some little goofy uh, medal for it. I don't, I don't respect that at all, because from what I saw, that was not real Muay Thai. I would have kicked his ass, all over the room uh, with what I saw from Mark Zuckerberg. That was a joke in his Muay Thai. Um, and so Americanized martial arts does not take into account real world battles. And I say that because, number one, you don't get really punched, you don't get really hurt, you don't go home with bruises, you don't go home with some fractures and injuries. And those injuries are also part of the training for pain management if you're in a battle. If you're in a battle and you get hit, I have seen so many times that martial arts black belts get their butts handed to them, or they're killed out here on the streets because they're not trained for real world combat. They're trained for points and for fighting, so to speak, in a ring, in a controlled environment, but without uh, real damage. And there's rules and regulations. There's prohibited punches and kicks. Well, what? In the real world, if you're in a fight, none of that applies. A lot of things happen, a lot of bad things. Nothing good happens in a street fight. And so, growing up in that kind of environment where I was from a very young age, I was jumped on by not usually one, but up to as many as five other kids would beat my butt until I got my martial arts training. Um, one of the one of the things that I can say is that uh, I didn't do everything. There were I've known martial artists that have gone on for different types of training, but training that I didn't see or feel that was necessary. One of those trainings that I've constantly heard, especially from Taekwondo students, was the Iron Fist. Yeah, yeah, because, well, Iron Fist would be helpful since Taekwondo is predominantly kicking and fighting with your feet, and a lot of kicks and moves with your feet, not a lot with your hands. And so that's why I can see why they would focus on iron palm uh, techniques, which is a lot of years of training, and there's a lot of conditioning on your hands. And I just didn't see the need for that. And in the real world, it wouldn't work anyway, because in a fight, the likelihood of you having coming or recovering from being attacked, and you have the wherewithal and still the technique and the skills to defend yourself and hopefully put down that perp, is likely very low. And I've seen a lot of martial arts people think that they're the baddest person on the street until they get into a real situation, real world situation, where there are no rules in a fight. Bottles can be used, weapons can be used, knives, a lot of things come out, and the normal, the typical American trained martial artist is not equipped, nor are they mentally um, trained to deal with that type of situation. And that's why I say pretty much most of the ones that I've seen, um, they're either they get injured or they get killed. And so that's why I was different. because I grew up in the streets. I learned to fight in the streets, and then I added martial arts. And one of the benefits about the biggest benefit to me in martial arts was the ability to be ambidextrous. Ambidextrous, meaning that I could use either of my hands, my legs, my feet, my everything equally, uh, from one side to another. Meaning, while I do have a strong side, which is right, but my left is almost as equal in strength, power, and speed, and it it carries over into other things in my life, such as my fishing, casting, and retrieving with the reels and rods. I can cast with either hand, which is an advantage because I use both left and right hand reels depending on what I'm doing. So the martial arts training helps you to to expand your mind, but also your skills in your hands, your feet, and giving you more dimension and skills in the event of an encounter. Uh, and one of the things that I can say, even with all my training, I've broken pretty much every single bone in both of my hands. I mean, you look at my joints, you can see my hands. This finger right here was actually cut off. I actually had it cut off, and it was reattached. But you can see a lot of the joints, a lot of my hands. There's a lot of injuries all up around the knuckles from where I've hit people and removed, literally removed teeth. But in Muay Thai, and we use elbows, and you see again, I that was a knife cut there. That was a block on a knife cut going sideways, and I blocked it because he was coming in at me. And then on this side, I have injuries also, and then a double stab right here on the major bone. So it didn't penetrate. While it I didn't really feel anything. It did bleed, but it's not deadly. And when there's not much penetration there, because right there there's tendons and bone, and so I timed it where uh, I blocked, and that way avoided being stabbed. And then also with part of the pain management back in 2004 when I first came out onto the streets. A lot of you remembered that I was attacked just before July 4th, and that's where this injury came from, and that was from a baseball bat. Three thugs, three criminals, were trying to murder me or kill me with that bat, take my head off, and then rob me. But fortunately, um, I had quick reactions, reflex, and I managed to get both hands up and deflected some of the energy of the bat that was coming for my head slightly upwards, and at the same time, it glanced off of me. It didn't do a direct hit, but there was enough impact where I saw stars, literally. And when I came back around, I was on the ground. I was pouring blood from there. So that's the kind of training that you learn through full contact, just like in boxing. You learn how to take a punch. And in martial arts, for real world fighting, you have to deal with pain and injuries in order to move on. And that's one of the things that is a key element that is missing in American martial arts. And I say that across the board. American martial arts lacks pain management and strategies, for a fight, rather than just being nothing but defensive, and you're reacting. Now you're you're truly interacting with the opponent, and we don't try to overpower, but we try and get a lot more impact in. And then one of the other things that's real important for training through your training is the proper stances. Uh, your basic horse stance uh, should be automatic and one of your basics, but also there are many other stances, and that's one of the things that Bruce Lee talked about. The different stance in his Jeet Kune Do, because he also admired fencing, which is swords, and there's a lot of footwork and foot movement in fencing, and so that was one of the things that really drew him in that. And boxing has a lot of footwork, and so that was one of the things with martial arts. There's a lot of different stances, and I can say uh, years past, I actually was in a situation where this wasn't a fight or anything, but I literally caught a 200-pound person flying off a 6-foot ladder at me, and I didn't move. I literally caught him in my arms and I put him down on the ground. This person was shocked when he came flying off. Everybody thought he was going to be going to the hospital for sure. When they saw him hit me, everybody thought, okay, now we're going to have two people going, and instead, I didn't move. I was like a tree. I was rooted, planted. My feet and stance were prepared for it because I saw it coming. I positioned myself into place to catch this individual. And when I did, my feet were firmly planted. I didn't move. I literally caught him in the air and put him down on the ground. And so that's the importance of having a good stance, because there are three elements in a fight. Just like for fire, there are three elements. You have to have air, fuel, and oxygen. In a fight, you have to be able to see, you have to be able to breathe, and you have to be able to move. So those are the three elements. You take away any one element, that fight cannot go on, because you have to be able to see, breathe, and move in a fight. And you remove any one element or two elements, the opponent is done. Uh, One of the things that is also important that I learned over the years, street fights are dirty, and so I fight dirty. There are no rules. I want you to remember, there are no rules. There absolutely are no rules in a street fight. If you are in a street fight, a bar fight, or any kind of person attacking you, there are no rules. Use your teeth. I use my forehead on a lot of people. I break bones. I kick people in the nuts. I kick knees, and I break arms. Some of you may say, well, that's a little extreme, but no. You see what goes on in a fight, and it's either you going to the hospital or the morgue or them. I make sure that if I'm going to the hospital, they're going to be right alongside me, and they're going to be in a lot worse shape. And in my previous vlog, like I said, over the years, the many years that I was outside on the street in March of 2014, and then I left just almost a year ago. October of 2022 is when I left the streets. I had a lot of violent encounters, and I wasn't happy with that, but that was life. That was real life here, living on the streets of Oakland. And the police aren't going to come to help you. By the time the police come, you're either going to be picked up by the ambulance and go try and patch you up, or the police are there to do the paperwork and put your toe tag on. And that's all that the Oakland police do, because they're not doing their jobs here, getting rid of the criminals. Fortunately, they did get rid of a threesome that But they also had information because I was already talking to OPD about that white Charger that has been carjacking people, that was in the news. I know the three characters there. I told Oakland Police Department about them, and they had a lot of bad things had to happen before Oakland Police finally caught up with them. But again, I fight dirty. I'll use whatever means, whatever it takes to defeat you. First thing I usually do is I grab your attention by blowing out one of your eardrums. I literally will uh, sabotage your equilibrium, we'll say. So I already put you at a huge disadvantage by blowing out one of your eardrums. And people, believe me, it's not that hard. And I do it regularly. And that gives me a huge advantage. And like I said, I grew up being outnumbered from a very young age. So I'm used to fighting uh, behind the eight ball, so to speak, and fighting up to 6 individuals at the same time. It's not, the fights never look like the movies where 1, 2 people come in, they get their butts beaten, then they stay down. No, it doesn't happen that way. All the entire group attacks, and so you have to formulate a way where you can control their access and them attacking you. And so that's why I usually set up a gauntlet in order to control the number of people that can occupy a certain space. And so by controlling the tempo, you can control the flow. And I control the flow always. Let's see what else I want to talk about. Well, according to my notes, I've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover in this portion. Uh, but American martial arts, karate was one of the biggest things um, back in the 60s and 70s. Everybody was talking about karate, karate this, karate that. Karate actually has its origins, its real origins in Kung Fu, because it originally originated from China, the Chinese. And it was just a style that came about that and developed and worked. So that's what I wanted to cover today. I'm going to be back with some more information, but that's Bruce Lee's influence here on the Bay Area. He wanted more full contact studios and teachings, but American system and also the legal system. We got a lot of people who think they want to learn martial arts, and first time they get hit, then this stuff doesn't work. We see that all the time, and I can tell you that it does work. My stepson, who was 10 at the time, he had gotten 14 hours of instruction from me. 14 hours. And he was able to defeat 3 equal size kids who were 2 to 3 years older than him. And I say that because he was a very tall kid, but he was young. And so he didn't have the same maturity as his attackers. But yet he was able to take down all 3 people with simply 14 hours of instructions from me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be right back.